Hello and welcome to the 2017 Personal Health Summit. If you're looking to become healthier and happier than you've ever been before, then you've come to the right place. The Personal Health Summit features an international collaboration of leading doctors, scientists, researchers, and health ambassadors, all working to change the conversation and transform world health. Every expert here is to share with you their knowledge, wisdom, and expertise to help you learn, grow, and become empowered to make informed choices and take control of your health and your life. Our mission, first and foremost, is to help you recognize that you are unique, that there are many different avenues to achieving and maintaining optimal health, and that there is one that's right for you at this very moment in time. Being informed is being empowered. And when you have the right information, you have the power to change your health, your happiness, and your life. The Personal Health Summit is made possible by the generous support of the Autoimmune Foundation, who's committed to educating and empowering people all over the globe to be proactive about their personal health, providing truly personalized health solutions for every human being on the planet with accessibility and affordability, and orchestrating and nurturing a global gathering of the world's key health experts and thought leaders at the vanguard of their respective fields, where solutions can be found to transform the future health of humanity. The Personal Health Summit is also made possible by PH360.me, the world's most advanced health assistant that interacts with you via your smartphone, just like a best friend who can calculate the best nutrition and lifestyle choices to most favorably and easily influence your unique hormones, genes, and personal state of health, empowering you to make easy, accurate lifestyle decisions to improve your sleep, energy, mood, weight, digestion, and well-being. Now on to today's guest. Dr. Terry Wahls is a clinical professor of medicine at the University of Iowa. She's also a patient with secondary progressive multiple sclerosis, which confined her to a tilt-recline wheelchair for 4 years. Dr. Wahls restored her health using a diet and lifestyle program she designed specifically for her brain, and she now pedals her bike to work each day. She's the author of many books about the Wahls protocol and a radical new way to treat all chronic autoimmune conditions. Dr. Wahls conducts clinical trials that test the effect of nutrition and lifestyle interventions to treat MS and other progressive health problems. She also teaches the public and medical community about the healing power of diet and therapeutic lifestyle changes that restore health and vitality to our citizens. If you'd like to learn more about Dr. Wahls on her website, terrywahls.com. Terry, I'm super excited for our conversation and our chat today, all about how to treat and reverse chronic autoimmune diseases. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. Well, I'd love to start, Terry, about your conversation and your story that got you here. You obviously have a fascinating history, as many of us do. And I'd love just to find out, can you tell us about you and your life and what you've experienced and how you're doing what you're doing today?
Sure. On a really high level, I'm an academic internal medicine doc. I was here at the University of Iowa and I was CBVA Hospital when I was diagnosed with relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis. And being an academic doc, I treated my disease aggressively. I sought out the best MS center I could find in the Midwest, which was the Cleveland Clinic, saw the best people, took the newest drugs, and still within 3 years, my disease had converted to secondary progressive MS. I was in a tilt-recline wheelchair, and I was continuing to go rapidly downhill. But again, still treated my disease very aggressively and continued to go downhill. But at that time, I realized that conventional medicine was not stopping this decline into a bedridden, possibly demented life. And I began studying the basic science, going to PubMed.gov, and would begin experimenting, with first vitamins and supplements. I was told by my Cleveland Clinic doctors about the paleo diet. So after 20 years of being a vegetarian, I went back to eating meat. I continued to decline. I gave up all grain, all legumes, all dairy, continued to decline. I discovered the Institute for Functional Medicine and took their course on neuroprotection and ultimately would combine what I'd learned reading the basic science myself, what I'd learned from the ancestral health movement, and what I learned from the Institute for Functional Medicine. And I would create a diet and lifestyle program designed specifically for my brain and my mitochondria that got me out of my wheelchair, up walking around, and within the year, able to do basically a 20-mile bike ride with my family. So this really changes how I understand disease and health. It would change the focus of my clinical practice, and it would change the focus of the research that I do. and that would lead to writing my book, changing our research, and really having this mission of teaching my clinical colleagues and the public that there is a great deal that we can do to restore our health and vitality when we have an autoimmune condition, when we have a neurodegenerative condition, when we have chronic health problems.
Absolutely fascinating, Terry, and I really resonate with that. I've had a very similar autoimmune background myself in the same position. It is fascinating to see, how things occur in our lives and why we do what we do, and it's really great to see you sharing such a great message in the world today. So thank you for doing what you're doing and for the positive sides of what we tend to experience in these circumstances.
I had to get profoundly disabled. I had to have progressive, horrific pain that couldn't be controlled in order to be willing to do all the work I had to do to relearn all this stuff. And now, in retrospect, I really think it was a tremendous gift to have become so disabled and to have experienced all this pain, because now it's given me a clear purpose and a very clear mission.
It's beautiful you share that perspective, Terry, and I thank you again for the work that you're doing and for the reasons that you can see in sometimes what would be potentially a misfortunate circumstance. You can see the positive gifts in those, and can help you on your journey, and that certainly helps others on there. So thank you again for all that you do, and it's a really great way to start a conversation like this, because you're obviously in a great space, in Western medicine, in academics. You can see, and you've been part of the system. You are part of the system, but
I am
experienced firsthand to see where the limitations in what we've known so far are really being applied to how the human body actually works. It's a very complex interdynamic system, and I'd love just to hear a bit about how you've actually how this experience of yours, your own personal experience, but also the research that you found, through trial and error and working with other patients. How's this changed what you're doing in your clinics now? What sort of, can you tell us about some of your research and as to how you approach things differently now?
Well, I'm going to sort of step back a little bit. So, when I created my protocol, it was on the basis of the research I was reading, starting in 2003, when I first started reading the research, and I was focused on mitochondria. And then came across Bruce Ames' work on nutrient triage theory. And if you didn't have enough of the vitamins and minerals, your body would triage the life-saving things you needed, vitamin K, for example, to clot your blood so you don't bleed to death. But you don't necessarily do the maintenance work that you would need to stay in good health in 10 to 20 years down the road. So I was designing my protocol all about the micronutrients, thinking I was fixing the mitochondria and addressing triage theory. And it certainly did all those things, and that would lead to my recovery. But now, as science has further evolved and our understanding of things like epigenetics and the microbiome have come into play, I think that my attention to phytonutrients probably greatly influenced gene expression and shifted which genes are on and off, shifted NF-kappa B, NRF2, and a whole slew of alphabet soup pathways that we know are really important to how my cells do their work of running the chemistry of life. So that was probably really important. We now know that the bacteria and the viruses and the yeast and the parasites living in our bowels turn genes on and off, influence how we run the chemistry of life, and can help us run our chemistry more effectively or in a way that's not very effective and really revs up inflammation. So the fact that one of the byproducts of eating all those vegetables I advocate and taking out all the sugar, processed food, and grains is we have a very different mix of bacteria living in our bowels. And that probably had a huge impact. And in all fairness, there are probably more mechanisms that have science has yet to discover that we'll realize are a factor in the things that we advocated. So part of what happened when I changed my clinical insights through my own experience, I began to talk less and less to my patients about drugs. And I talk more about cellular chemistry and how we have to fix that. And so my medical students would think I'm getting ready to talk about the newest drug, but I'm talking about broccoli, and I'm talking about onions, and I'm talking about mushrooms, and I'm talking about blueberries and elderberries. And but I had to, for the medical students, talk in biochemistry so they would understand that food could be used to influence biochemistry and influence our cells on the biology of life. And my patients could understand that food was just as powerful as drugs. And by teaching why food was so powerful, I could get my patients fired up about changing their diets, and I could get the medical students and the young residents understanding that, yes, we could use drugs, but we could also have the same powerful impacts on how our cells are on the chemistry of life by changing the food that we ate. And I realized I had to understand my biochemistry at a higher level than my colleagues who are prescribing drugs, because I need to teach at a level that's going to be respected and validated. So if you teach the biochemistry and the physiology, and then when people are expecting that I'm going to be talking about the newest drug, but say, well, actually, broccoli and the sulforaphane in the broccoli is what is driving these chemical changes.
That's such a fascinating.
It's an unexpected finding. They're like, oh, okay. But that is how I gained credibility with my young student doctors, is teach the physiology and the biochemistry and relate it back to the chemical components within the food.
That's a fascinating conversation, Terry, and I really appreciate the approach you're taking. It's important, especially in this day and age with the science and medicine basis that we have, to be able to quantify and to be able to actually observe the different changes that happen in the biochemistry in the body, how each individual biology is affected by different things and different foods, and to, I guess, understand that food is medicine and medicine is food in the same conversation. I really appreciate the way you're approaching that. One of the things I'm just interested in, I know a lot of people are interested in, is, can you tell us a bit more about like the Wahls protocol? How does that actually treat pain? Like you're talking about like some concepts here of reducing inflammation or repairing neurons, and can you just talk?
Well, I'm going to talk about it from my own personal experience and the observation that we've had. So I have occipital neuralgia, which means when my pain turns on, it's because there's more inflammatory cytokines being produced, probably in response to, in my case, being exposed to gluten, a protein found in many grains, or casein, a protein found in dairy products, that crosses over into my bloodstream, causes a release of inflammatory cytokines, which cross over into my brain, past the blood-brain barrier, and gets into the cranial nerves, the occipital nerves that are coming out. And so how that is experienced in my case is I have these electrical jolts of pain either on the right side of my face or on the left side of my face. It's like a cattle prod. And if you see this happening to me, you get a grimace. If it gets severe enough, then I begin to grunt. And then if it gets severe enough, I crunch down more. If it gets severe enough, then I can't maintain muscle tone to stand. So then by then it's really horrible. And to turn off all that inflammation, I need to take very high dose prednisone or salumedrol to get things turned off. Or I can be meticulous and see to it that I'm not exposed to gluten or casein, so I don't have that trigger that revs up that release of those inflammatory cytokines. And I can tell if I get exposed in 6 to 24 hours, that familiar cascade will happen. And then I have to respond in a couple hours to get that high-dose steroids to get it turned off. Or I'll have that horrific level of pain for 2 to 6 weeks. And I've been down that path many times, so I try very hard not to go down that path again. Now, in my lifestyle clinic that I ran for many years, we've had pain, refractory chronic pain was the number one reason that people would come see us. And it'd be pain from a wide variety of causes. It might be neuropathic pain, diabetic neuropathy, small fiber neuropathy, a traumatic neuropathy. It could be neuropathic pain because they've had an amputation or a war injury, or it could be psoriatic arthritis, fibromyalgia, autoimmune disease. So a wide variety of problems. And in all of those people that are coming through, we'd explain that the most common driver of this pain is high level of inflammatory cytokines that have crossed over, created more inflammation in the brain, more excitotoxicity. And so if we can lower the inflammation molecules and lower the glutamate in the brain, that we'd be very hopeful that we could lower the severity of their pains. And so we would teach them about diet and lifestyle. I'd go through a timeline of their illness, help them identify the environmental factors that were a factor in why they became unwell. And we would put them on our level 1 diet. If they were more advanced, I might put them, also remove the nightshades as well. And then we'd bring them back in a month, see how they're doing, treat their biochemical abnormalities. We had some basic lab tests that we would do. And then I would fine-tune things. But I'll say the vast majority of folks, when they would come back for their follow-up in 4 to 6 weeks, they could tell us that for the first time, pain was beginning to diminish. It was really very common that we'd see people who'd been on chronic narcotics need less and less narcotics over time. Often we could get them off narcotics entirely. Their blood pressure would improve, their blood sugars would improve, and erectile dysfunction was often a problem, even for our very young guys, gentlemen in their 20s, and we often were able to ultimately improve that for them as well.
Wow,
but it really comes down to reducing the inflammation, reducing those inflammatory cytokines, which then over time lets the irritability in the brain, steadily reduce. And then the brain can self-regulate that pain, and pain diminishes.
Terry, this is a really, really fascinating conversation that we're having today. And I know there's a lot of hot topics around these conversations. And particularly at the moment, there's a very strong interest out there in the microbiome. It's certainly in the science community has become a lot more of a hot topic in the last 10 years or so.
Yes.
And in the general public, it's become a very hot topic in the last 12 months. Would you be able to just talk to us a little bit about the microbiome, how that might impact the risk of MS or other autoimmune diseases, how that actually works and how that correlates in that aspect?
Well, I'll sort of step back for a moment. You and I have about 25,000 genes that run our chemistry of life. But when I went to medical school, we looked at how many proteins that we make in our bodies. And I remember our professors telling us that they thought we'd have about 100,000 genes. But we only have 25,000 genes. So we're missing 75,000 genes. Like, where the hell did they go? Because we still have those proteins, they have to get made. And we now have sort of the answer, or we think we have the answer. Our ancestors, however many thousands of ancestors ago that it went, if there is a mutation, that an enzymatic step couldn't happen very well anymore because of the spontaneous mutation, the enzyme just didn't work. But our ancestry had bacteria in our bowels that could do that enzymatic step. You know what? Our ancestors still had reproductive success. And at that moment, that gene got exported from our ancestors' DNA into the DNA in the microbiome. So over those thousands of generations, we slowly whittled down the genes that were critical that we couldn't export. And the 75,000 genes that we could export to our bacteria, our viruses, yeast, and parasites that live in our bowels, they got exported, and we had reproductive success. And so scientists have been able to look at the DNA living of the microbes in our gut, and there's actually about 9 million genes. If you decide we don't want the duplicated ones, it comes down to 5 million genes. Now, a lot of that stuff makes trash that we don't want or need, and our liver will filter that trash out. But clearly, a lot of those genes, about 75,000 genes, we need to run our chemistry of life. And so how our ancestors solved those 75,000 genes, is different whether our ancestors lived in Africa or in Europe or in South America, North America, or Asia. So we have different mixes of bacterial species that fill in those niches. But it's pretty clear in terms of metabolic functions that our bacteria run. That's actually fairly common. So if you look at the microbiome and say, what metabolic stuff does it do? There's a great deal of commonality for us all. If you take a census, who's running that metabolic machinery, it'll be different because our ancestors solved it differently over time. And we pass those solutions, mother to offspring, as we squirted our children out through the birth canal. And, the baby's facing face down towards the rectum. It's usually got a face full of poop on the way out because you're straining and poop's coming out and the baby's coming out. It's a pretty messy affair. And so they got some bacteria from the vagina, from the rectal vault, and that's how, over those thousands of generations, we're able to pass on those other 75,000 genes that we need to run the chemistry of life. It's just so exciting because, we can't grow these bugs, but we can measure their DNA, we can measure their genes, we can sort of measure the metabolic activity. We're learning more and more. And we're also learning that as we shifted what we ate from what our ancestors would have eaten, 10,000 years ago, or 5,000 years ago, or 100 years ago, or 50 years ago, we're fertilizing different bacterial species. And so we're not as robust as we used to be, probably because we don't have that same 75,000 genes as well represented, and we're having negative health consequences.
Absolutely fascinating conversation here. We are live with Dr. Terry Wahls on the Health Lounge. We're currently talking about genetics, the microbiome, and the relationship with autoimmune diseases. Terry, can you just share with us a little bit more about the microbiome, because this is a fascinating conversation. It's very related to autoimmune diseases, as you know. Could you talk about how that actually also influences and correlates with things like mood and behavior? This is really fun studies that have gone on where we've kept track of the moods and behaviors of individuals day by day, and the poop collection in terms of what species were in the poop day by day. And they saw a very interesting correlation that as our census changes in terms of who's living in our poop, mood and behavior changes as well. Fascinating stuff. And there's more awareness of a very clear connection between the bacteria and microbes living in our guts, and how as they run the chemistry of life and do their stuff and make little small molecules, that crosses over into our bloodstream. And as I said, our liver filters out the stuff that is not good for us, assuming you have a healthy liver, and leaves the stuff that's helpful in the bloodstream. It'll come up to my brain, and these small molecules filter past the blood-brain barrier, and will have impact again on mood and behavior. So startling to think that there's growing evidence that the microbes can influence our behavior, can influence our mood.
and you can sort of think about this, that microbes have been around 1.5 billion years, maybe 2 billion years. Plants and animals have been around not as long. Mammals, 200 million. Primates, humans, our ancestors, primate ancestors, 2.5 million. Homo sapiens, 500,000. The microbes have been around far longer than us. Far longer than us. They divide every 20 minutes. And there's a huge evolutionary advantage to them to be very adaptable to their environment. So when we first became multicellular and had guts, let's say 500 million years ago, we brought those ancient microbes with us into our guts, and they've been dividing every 20 minutes. Very flexible, very adaptable, and they have a evolutionary interest in manipulating our behavior to their advantage, to get us to eat stuff that's going to favor that microbe and suppress another microbe. So there's a war going on in us for the microbes to survive, and they are manipulating us to their advantage. Sort of shocking, are we just great spaceships for the microbial war that's going on inside us? I mean, this could be a great sci-fi novel, movie kind of thing to write about. But we assume that we are the higher ordered species, and I guess we are. We're controlling the Earth, and yet the evidence continues to grow that the microbes are influencing our behavior, and there's a huge evolutionary advantage that the microbes that are most effective at influencing the behavior of the host will be the ones that will be most successful.
Terry, this is such fascinating information, delving into the depths of the science about actually considering these conversations about the power of the microbes and how this does actually influence our daily lives and our daily choices. And just to bring us out of that depth of the science and conversation is how that influences our daily lives. And often the questions that we get, if for those who are sitting on the couch on the Health Lounge listening to this right now, is how do we actually implement this sort of science and this sort of information into our daily lives? And particularly one of the conversations I'm sure you're well aware of, and you are well aware of, if you could speak to it, is about people who say, look, it'd be great to do this, but what if my situation financially is limited? I can't afford to have all this sort of stuff. Like, could you share a bit about that and how we can maybe navigate that conversation for people listening right now?
Well, for years, I worked at a hospital that served people who didn't have money. The Veteran Affairs Hospital took care of vets, many of whom were service-connected, some who had been disabled, not working for a long time because of their chronic health issues. And so the people who I saw were often on disability, living on food stamps. Finances were very, very limited. Still, we had marvelous results. And what helped was the VA taught me how to think about this, like how am I going to help these folks who have such limited resources? So what I learned was we had to teach them how to cook. They had forgotten how to cook or never learned how to cook. I had to teach them how to think about their food budget, how to plan menus, that the food budget isn't just the grocery bill, it's the bill for everything you're putting in your mouth. It's your tobacco, it's your alcohol, it's your energy drinks, it's your restaurant meals, it's your fancy coffees, it's your liqueur, your booze, and your grocery bill. So helping people see all of that, and then helping them take on the task of making a menu, making a shopping list, planning their meals. We teach them how to cook. We teach them how to eliminate food waste. And very, very consistently, we're able to show them they could implement these concepts and save money. And because we'd have these group classes, we'd have a mix of the newbies and the more senior folks. And we'll let them come every month for a year. The more senior folks would teach the newbies, like, yes, you can do this. Be very encouraging. and to help them reimagine their relationship with food, cook, and how to, make a menu, plan for leftovers, and how to eliminate food waste. So if you have lots of money and you can get organic wild caught, great. If you can't, and we want people to start with where they're at, we have to quit buying food that is harmful and get the foods that are healthful. If that means you're starting out with canned foods, that's fine. We'd teach them how to do that. They would go to frozen foods, and we'd teach people about farmers markets. And our patients were incredibly creative. One of the tricks that they taught us was, you go to a farmer's market and you walk around and you go to all the stalls and say, now, at the end of the farmer's market, what's the best price you could give me for what you got left? And people would be able to identify farmers who didn't want to take the food back to the farm, but would give them a very nice discount on the leftover vegetables.
Terry, thank you so much for walking through that conversation. I think it's a really important one to actually check in on where we're at in life and how we can actually navigate through this from any circumstance in any place. I'd love just to expand that a little bit, exactly how we can, if there's one single most powerful intervention that we could have a conversation about right now to help lower and or cause mortality and morbidity, what would a message around that be? Like, some places to really start once we've got our teeth.
Make home cooked meals. You have to learn how to cook and start learning to cook at home. And the other incredibly powerful thing to do is to teach your children to cook at home. Give them chores. Have them help you set the table, clear the table, help with making meal prep. It's vital for them to improve their nutrition, to improve their future economic success. And it's important family time.
That's some beautiful advice there. Thank you again, Terry. We're here live on the Health Lounge with Dr. Terry Wahls. Terry, we've had a very fascinating conversation so far about this approach to autoimmune diseases, particularly MS obviously has been your path and journey. What other illnesses can this help, this approach, this new way of thinking?
Well, so in the clinic that we ran, so it's been in primary care, the traumatic brain injury clinic, our therapeutic lifestyle clinic, and then, of course, the thousands and thousands of followers that we have. Let me sort of back. So in primary care, we see it very helpful in improving blood pressure, blood sugar, diabetes, fatty liver disease, metabolic syndrome, plastic ovarian disease, infertility, erectile dysfunction. Very helpful for all those things. In my traumatic brain injury clinic, an injury, it used to be that they'd say, you're either going to get better or not. We'll just have to wait and see. I came and said, oh no, there's a lot we can do. And I teach people how to use diet and lifestyle. It would help them get rid of their pain, their irritability, their balance problems, their memory problems that had been plaguing them for years after their concussion. So we help people with these chronic problems after concussion and traumatic brain injuries. And that was just such a delight to see. And many of those folks had been plagued with severe post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, and those mental health symptoms markedly reduced. In my therapeutic lifestyle clinic, again, pain was the number one reason that people came. So pain from a wide variety of causes would be helped. And we'd see autoimmune problems, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, MS, of course, myasthenia gravis, psoriasis, psoriatic arthritis, and a variety of other autoimmune conditions that are rare enough I've not heard of those names beforehand. That would be helpful. In terms of the neurodegenerative problems that we've seen, Parkinson's, early cognitive decline, early Alzheimer's, moderate Alzheimer's, were reversed. So that was very helpful. I've had many folks with ALS. Now, ALS is a progressive disease. People die within 4 years on average, and they go downhill. There is no therapy that's helpful for ALS. The drug therapies, the best drugs, might give you an extra month, maybe 6 weeks at best. And I've had multiple people reach out to me to say that they've started my protocol, it's stabilized them. I always urge them to please go see a functional medicine doc because I know the time course to death is so rapid. But we've had so many reports of ALS being stabilized, and we've had some very nice success, so that I am writing a protocol, and I'm working to try and raise funds to get a prospective study, pilot study looking at using our diet in the setting of ALS. Now, those of us who may be watching this, if you have ALS, please start the protocol. I still want you to go see a functional medicine doc because I want you to have the best chance at stabilizing your disease. But I certainly want to offer hope for you that I think the protocol is certainly worth trying. I would see the functional medicine folks as well. But again, we had some surprising success, at least in our followers, with implementing the Wahls protocol for even ALS.
Fantastic. We're here live on the Health Lounge with Dr. Terry Wahls. Terry, you've just been talking about the implications and the effects of helping people reverse or at least slow progressions of some of these chronic disease states. What about for people who are listening at home to this conversation right now? There's probably many people who have family and friends in these situations. But what about for those who don't have any chronic illness right now? Would this make a difference, these protocols for them in prevention? Could you share a bit about that for a minute?
Oh, sure. So if you're worried about family history, because if you have a family history for diabetes or cancers or Alzheimer's, it's your genes interacting with your environment that will determine if you too are going to have that bad outcome. So implementing the Wahls protocol will help see to it that those harmful genes are turned off and the health-promoting genes are turned on. So it dramatically increases the probability that your brain's going to work well into your 50s, 60s, 70s, and 100. And that's what we all want. We want a vibrant brain to over 100. We want a vibrant body to over 100. And this is the best way to achieve that. If you're an athlete, we have many athletes who have stumbled into our protocol and are telling us that this has really improved their athletic performance. So for those of you who are well, this is your best shot at staying healthy and vital through all the decades of your life, into your 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and even up to 100.
Beautiful, Terry. And I'd love just to explore a little bit. I know that you have done a lot of research and you're always in that space. Can you update us a little bit about what's happening in the research space with you? What's next in the research lab? What are you studying now? What can we expect to see from your research
sure.
in the future?
We have the preliminary, the first papers we put out on the folks with primary, secondary progressive MS treated with our diet and lifestyle program. We have lots and lots of data that we're slowly working through analyzing. And we've recently published the analysis of the mood and cognitive performance. We're able to show that, again, in a progressive phase of the disease, primary, secondary progressive MS, they were able to improve depression, anxiety, so they had less anxiety, less depression, and better processing speed, better verbal reasoning, better nonverbal reasoning, better working memory. In a progressive disease, really quite remarkable. We are analyzing our MRI data, and so I'll be able to come back. I'm hoping that we'll get that out sometime the next year where we can talk about the structural changes that we saw. We have a paper that will soon be coming out. This is going to be so exciting, that has the changes that we observed with walking performance. in, again, that first 20 group. So that paper's been approved. It's going through the author proof stage. That'll probably be getting released sometime yet in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And what will be exciting about that is we have the videos of baseline walking and how their walking ability changed over time. And so you'll see some of the changes in how quickly those changes showed up. And of course, you'll see that some folks were not able to improve and they deteriorated. But when you have primary, secondary progressive MS, gait deteriorates. This should not happen. People should not improve. And so when this paper comes out, what's going to be so fun is the paper will be open access. We're very particular about that. People will be able to click on the link and see these videos. I was just looking at the proof today. It gave me chills thinking that soon we'll be able to put these links out to this open access paper on my social media feed, and people will be able to finally get to see these videos that we have of the before and after gaits. So that's just going to be breathtaking. The study that I'm doing right now is the Swank versus Wahls diet study, and this study is funded by the National Multiple Sclerosis Society. People come in, we observe them for 12 weeks eating their usual diet, then we randomize them. They get either doing the Swank diet, which is the low saturated fat diet, or the Wahls diet. We watch them for 12 more weeks. We again repeat the measurements. And then we watch them for another 12 weeks, repeat the measurements, and then they're out. We, at the end of August, we'll have our first 10 folks through, and we're going to ultimately get 100 folks into the study. So we probably have another 2 years to go. This is going to be very exciting, lots of fun to be able to report on that. And I had mentioned that we are writing a protocol to test our program in the setting of ALS. And I've just put together a list of projects that we'd like to do, looking at analyzing our biospecimens for gene expression for the microbiome. And we can do some nutritional adequacy studies. And I have a partner in Bastyr who has data on 1,000 patients that they've been following every 6 months with diet and lifestyle questionnaires. And they tell me that I think 300 of the subjects in that group report that they're on either the paleo diet or the Wahls diet. There are a lot of folks with the Swank, McDougall, Mediterranean diet. And so it'll be very interesting to look at that epidemiologic data as well. So lots of possibilities. We're excited. I love going to work. I love looking at this data. I love being able to begin to answer these questions of how diet and lifestyle can impact our health. Because we're not ill because we're missing drugs. We're ill or we have great health because of the diet and lifestyle choices that we make. And the more we can have research that examines those relationships, the sooner my colleagues can understand that the highest leverage for improving health is all about diet and lifestyle, as opposed to $100,000 a year drugs.
Terry, thank you so much for that beautiful message, and it's such an important message at the moment to be sharing that diet and lifestyle does influence our health in a significant way. There is hope for all of us, and it's just a matter of understanding a lot about these new concepts and new research and new philosophies that are coming out. So thank you again so much for the work that you're doing in that space. If you had a final message that you would like to share with the world, if you could stand on the rooftops and yell it out and everyone, all 7.5 billion of us could hear it, what would that be right now?
Creating health is the most powerful intervention that we can do for treating chronic disease. And we create health by food quality, physical activity choices, environmental exposures. So it's all about diet and lifestyle. We choose our fate.
Such a powerful message. Dr. Terry Wahls, thank you so much for joining us here today. A fascinating conversation that it's actually possible to use diet and lifestyle interventions to actually not just prevent but also reverse chronic autoimmune conditions and many other things. So thank you so much once again for all the incredible work that you're doing in the world, that you've been on your own health journey, that you can now share this with all of us to benefit from.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, for supporting this gathering of world experts, thought leaders, and innovators looking to change the course of the health and wellness of the human race, and for being empowered and actively committed to your own health in mind, body, and spirit. I'm Matt Riemann, and on behalf of all of us at the Personal Health Summit, we thank you for tuning in, and we wish you the utmost personal health and happiness in every day of your life.